The holistic approach, in my eyes, is saying, why do you have this symptom? If your blood pressure and cholesterol are high, rather than coming in and treating your blood pressure and cholesterol with a pill, let's look at your diet. What's your movement level and level of activity? I was like, what if we can kind of habit stack and get them done while we're doing something that we're already looking forward to doing or that we don't need a reminder for? I need to go out there and I need to change people's lives and do something positive. And, then that's going to be your life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wellness for Life. I'm your host, Niki Wolf, and today I'm excited to welcome Jordan Ryan. He is a wellness entrepreneur and former Naval and Marine Special Operations medic. He's the owner of San Diego's first adaptogen-infused coffee company and a leader in the wellness industry. He has an MBA and a Master of Supply Chain Management. He's turned his personal healing journey with plant medicine into a thriving business, specializing in adaptogens, CBD, and mushrooms. And he also hosts the podcast, The Mind Body Mushroom, where he explores natural alternatives and wellness. Jordan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Niki. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I first want to say thank you for your service and what you've provided to this country. I'm a big support of our military and just the sacrifices that they all make and you all make. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, of course, it was a privilege. So I'm thankful for my opportunity to serve as well. But thank you for recognizing it.
Awesome. Well, I feel like that is kind of the perfect way to start out, is understanding your background, because from my understanding of what I've read and what I've heard, really this is kind of the genesis of what brought you into this industry and looking into holistic medicine to help heal your body because of some of the experiences that you went through with the military or kind of the transition out. So I'd love for you to kind of just open up and share your background in the military and what made that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was enlisted in the Navy as a medic, a corpsman, and I worked within Naval and Marine Special Operations. So, the Marine Corps has their Navy SEALs, which the Marine Raider battalions, and they draw all of their medics from the Navy. And so being a medic and wanting to work in special operations and kind of having been trained to do so through my time before the Navy and then entering, that was sort of the field that I went into. And it was a very physically demanding job. You're doing a ton of rucking with weight on your back, long ocean swims, bunch of stuff in the pool, treading with bricks, doing stuff underwater, buddy tows, land navigation, basic reconnaissance, all these different sort of very physical skills. And I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed kind of approaching it from a medical standpoint of you're the guy that when stuff hits the fan, you got to be the guy who's in charge of this and triaging patients and getting them to safety and addressing all the stuff. So I really liked that aspect of my job. Unfortunately, in training, I got injured. I injured my back. Had a really bad back injury. Horrible sciatica. Couldn't barely walk. Couldn't stand. Couldn't sit. Sleeping horribly, and it totally sidelined my career in this profession. So, I was moving in a certain direction, and now all of a sudden I was the guy that, couldn't go on the ruck runs, couldn't do any of the things, always had to go to appointments, had to do that sort of, that type of stuff. So, on top of the physical symptoms of pain, discomfort, radiculopathy, all the nerve stuff, etc., there was also a ton of psychological sort of anxiety, depression, wrestling with, your identity, your ego, how others are perceiving you now, what that means, you feeling like a failure, all of this stuff that's sort of on top of, the uncertainty of, hey, are you ever going to get better? So my initial kind of path was, well, I got to do what I got to do to get back in the fight and get back to training and do what I needed, get back with my team. So was going down a very Western medical approach, a lot of pills, injections, surgeries, and I wasn't getting a lot better. It was becoming clear kind of around this time that my career was in question in the long term, as well as my health and all these other things that I sort of talked about. And that was like a pivotal moment for me, because my mindset sort of changed to, from how do I get better and get back to doing my job, to, hey, this might be some version of my life managing these symptoms. And if that's the case, how do I do so sustainably? And naturally, such that I'm not just shoveling handfuls of pills in my mouth every day and dealing with all of these second and third order effects from the medications, the injections, being out of commission for surgery, doing the recovery, etc. And that's what kind of got me exploring holistic wellness, plant medicine, surf therapy, and kind of kicked off the next chapter of my life.
That's incredible. I appreciate you sharing that. And I hear stories. I don't think I've ever interviewed somebody from the military, but I've heard stories of, professional athletes where they get this injury and the amount of identity attached to them. I can only imagine if it's at that level, if not more, from the experiences that you go through, the fight for the country and just the willingness to do something greater than yourself, and having to be pulled from that kind of almost out of your own control. So I can imagine that the psychological impact has to be incredible to go through. And, just, I guess, commends to you for being able to work through that. And I'm sure there's still moments, where you got to fight this battle, but I do think we all, carry across, and there's certain things that we have to overcome. And now look at what you've been able to create going through those experiences. I'm not trying to therapize. I think about how deep and impactful that must have been, and how you were able to transform that story and create now this company and being able to help others. So you mentioned a few, and we'll get into kind of, a little bit of the difference between military medicine and holistic medicine, but I just love to hear a little bit of some of your other approaches. You mentioned surf therapy. What were some of the other modalities that you used to heal?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you said a lot there that was really good. I want to hop into some modalities, but I just want to say one thing that's kind of related to this was, starting WindanSea and kind of figuring out how to channel what I was learning and discovering for myself, and making that my mission to create something that I could then use to impact my community and also educate and create products like that. It was, WindanSea became my lifeline. It was my chance to not feel like a failure, not feel like I was broken, to go and do something hard again, and that was meaningful and mission driven. And, so it really, in a lot of ways, I attribute, my successful transition into civilian life with entrepreneurship and really trying to build something and come at it with purpose.
Was that something that was kind of taught to you I'm just curious, I'm hoping that the military, and I guess it depends on, who you work with, that offers, going to therapy or utilizing these tools, or is that kind of more of a familial experience of let's dive into this? How did you, Sure. I don't think everybody can make that transition. My husband has worked in the addiction field, and he's kind of probably going to be going to working with vets. And so that's something that's big on our heart, but cool. I don't know if that's the approach that everybody takes. And so where did that inspiration come to make that switch?
Sure. Yeah. I would say, the military tries to they have these transition programs, like TAPS is one of them. And they're sort of checking the box of we're showing you how to make a resume, and we're trying to help you kind of transition. There's a lot of stuff for veterans out there. If you want to work for the federal government or a state government or anything like that, you get preferential hiring. So you do learn about some of these things, but still, I do think that general consensus with a lot of people when they get out is it's sort of like, all right, thanks for your time. Like, there's the door, best of luck to you. And you don't really know all of the details of your benefits, which was something while I was in grad school. It was another like great honor to be able to do this. I worked in the military veteran office, and I was helping, transitioning students, like, hey, navigate your GI Bill and all of your education benefits, because I got 3 master's degrees for free because of the GI Bill, and it was life changing. And that was a really important transition time for me as well, because I was in medicine, and I'm doing this job. I was thinking I might go into medicine, like, right? That would make sense. So I'm looking at, okay, nursing degrees, physical therapy, firefighting, all these other things. And, that ultimately was not the route that I went down for a number of reasons. But fortunately, I had this like grace period where I was doing something constructive. I was back in school. I was getting, my graduate degrees, and I was figuring, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? I knew that there was, while I was in, I don't think anyone like loves the military while they're in, it's something that you like appreciate more in retrospect than while you're there doing
Unless
it.
you're David Goggins.
Yeah. He was actually he was one of my instructors in Great Lakes up in Chicago, and he's the real deal, dude. He is that guy 24/7. One of the most inspirational people I've ever met. It was wild. But yeah, I think for most people, right, they're kind of like, it's something you look back in retrospect. And that was something that, like, at the time, looking back, I was able to really see that, like, it doesn't matter what your job was. You could be, admin, personnel, a cook, everybody is making sacrifices. Everybody is, enduring hardship and dealing with difficulties transitioning when they get out. And there's a very big lack of education in terms of some of these more holistic modalities out there. Living in San Diego, California, it's very cultural to see yoga classes on the beach and, a sound bath clinic or, plant medicine retreats and all these different things. Like, you see them all around. You see them on Instagram. You might know somebody that's doing it. So it's easy to find, even if you're a transitioning veteran, and not feel like it's like a weird thing to do, but some people, they get out of the military, maybe they're injured, maybe they're not, and they go back to another state, another place that maybe does not have that type of culture. And you are, subject to just like the VA, what they're going to give you, alcohol and easy access to handguns. So, it makes sense why veterans are disproportionately likely to commit suicide. The number is like 22 veterans a day. I think it's even higher than that now, which is crazy. And that was just something that I kind of noticed, that, like, all right, I'm very fortunate to be open-minded enough to want to explore these things, understanding that, like, hey, okay, John Rambo is not your tomorrow, right? Like, that's not your tomorrow. You need to figure out what that next chapter is going to be. And like, some guys are not able to do that. They are going to hold on to that previous identity of themselves because they don't know what their next version is. So I was very lucky in a lot of ways, but I saw that not everyone had all those resources and not everyone had that same mindset. And I became very passionate about trying to create a company that made something cool and good and that I liked and that I used, but whose underlying mission was really trying to change the culture within the veteran community to be more open and accepting of these other modalities.
Fantastic. I just want to bring something up. You mentioned lucky, but I have to say that there could be luck involved, but you also put in the work and the time and the energy to do that. And I don't think everybody is willing to do that. And you're also putting your energy towards making a difference in other people's lives. One thing that I firmly believe, especially if you struggle with mental health of any aspect, that if you want to get out of your head, get into somebody else's heart, make somebody else important. And so what you're doing is that is a way to shift and work through our trauma. And that's what you're doing. You're putting in in the work, because I think there's a balance of like the empathy and the feeling, but we also have to take action. And so I clearly see that. And so maybe you say Lex involved, but I just want to give you a little bit more props that you are putting in a lot of that effort.
Well, thank you.
So let's explore kind of the differences between the military medicine and holistic medicine. And I do believe, I've been in the hospital since I was 3 years old. I was just in the ER, everything's good.
Oh, no.
But,
good.
I have to use Western medicine at some times, and there is a purpose for that. If my leg's fallen off, don't rub aloe vera on it. Like, get me everything that it needs. But there's a role and I think foundational support to holistic medicine. So one, I'd love to explore the difference between those in your eyes, but also really what created that transition. I mean, coming from the military and being doused with all these pills, did you just walk into a health food store and somebody told, like, how did that transition happen?
Yeah, totally. Okay. So, the first part of that question is kind of what's the difference? And I think you kind of nailed it there with, if your leg's falling off, you don't want someone to come and rub aloe vera on it. Like, thank God for Western medicine, the technology, the advances. I mean, doctors they dedicate their entire lives to this practice and to, continuously learning and improving and, you having a good health outcome. So there's absolutely a place for Western medicine. I would say in my eyes, the biggest difference between Western medicine and what we can call like holistic, approach is that Western medicine is very focused on identifying your symptoms and then from there backing into a diagnosis and then treating the symptoms or the diagnosis. And it's very like, zooming into wherever the problem is and then surgically kind of treating that problem. And hey, maybe there's there's a second order problem that comes on because of that, like a side effect. Like a perfect, very common example, let's say, is like taking anti-inflammatory drugs like NSAIDs, ibuprofen. So you take a lot of NSAIDs. Hey, you're dealing with chronic pain, so you're taking anti-inflammatory to help deal with the pain. Okay, that's great. But now it's like wearing through the lining of your stomach. So now you're starting to develop acid reflux. So you go into the doctor and they're like, don't worry, we got a pill for acid reflux too. And then you see how and we all know it. We've all been there, hey, I take Adderall because I need to focus more, but then I can't sleep very well. So the doctor prescribed me Ambien so I can get to sleep. But then, I have a hard time really waking up because I'm all conked out and now I take more Adderall. And so we create these that's the Western medical approach. There's a place for it. Thank God for it. But, the holistic approach in my eyes is saying, why do you have this symptom? Great. We see that you have this, but, if your blood pressure and cholesterol are high, rather than coming in and treating your blood pressure and cholesterol with a pill, let's look at, your diet, what's your movement level and level of activity? What external stressors are you dealing with in your life? How do we zoom out and look at the context in which you reside and then start treating the symptoms that way? And that to me, just kind of makes a little bit more sense. But also I feel like, especially for stuff that's chronic, you're managing it. Like, hopefully whatever you have, you can make it go away. You know what I mean? That is ideal. That is the best case scenario. But there are a lot of conditions that people have, that are chronic. And if they're chronic, my perspective was, how do I manage this with doing the least harm in the long run to my health?
Absolutely. And I think the purpose too is, let's get to the root of what's going on,
yes,
and let's stop putting a Band-Aid on some of these things. I don't know if you've heard it, despite what your listeners' political view is, and I haven't watched the whole thing, but RFK and Casey and Callie Means and just this whole group that just did kind of a speech on changing the way we approach healthcare and,
huge.
What is currently going on now and what can transform and move the needle for our health is tremendous. And it's really talking a lot about this stuff, that there are so many chronic conditions that can actually be healed with natural support and remedies. I just did an episode, I think it'll air well, it'll be aired probably before this goes live, but it's really talking about, acute disease versus chronic diseases. And when we are, to your point of NSAIDs and all these different things, when we are constantly suppressing acute illnesses, that can actually, there's studies that show that it can lead to some of the chronic. So how do we utilize holistic modalities to heal and prevent some of these other ones? Now, we're going to dive into a few specific adaptogens, but before we do that, tell us a little bit more about your company. And I really want to, hone in on the coffee and what you do with the coffee that makes it so unique, so powerful, and so healing for specifically our nervous system, especially in regards to caffeinated coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. So that actually is perfect kind of segue into the second part of your question, which was kind of like, how did I discover this transition, right? So I, was dealing with all of these issues and was also dealing with a lot of side effects from my medication. And I went to undergrad college at the University of Oregon. So we were, Cannabis 101 was like my freshman year. I was very, very familiar with that plant medicine. But I was still in the military, and so I couldn't use THC products. I didn't want to, jeopardize kind of like my benefits and all this stuff. So I was like, let me try CBD. I hadn't really tried it very much, but I knew that it had, many of the same benefits. It wasn't federally illegal. They weren't testing for it, and it wasn't against any rules. So I was trying that and was getting benefit, mostly with like my kind of like anxiety, sleep, stress type stuff. But there's a lot of anti-inflammatory properties to CBD as well. But so that was kind of like our first product. And then I started exploring more into the medicinal mushroom space, just, because I don't believe in like silver bullets, like, this one plant, this one pill, this one thing. Like, I really do think part of holistic approach is supplementation is an aspect, lifestyle, all these things are an aspect. So there's a number of things. And within supplementation, even there, it's like, okay, CBD, we like it, great. But that may not be the only thing out there, so I started looking into some of these medicinal mushrooms, seeing that there was a lot of impact on inflammation, nerve regeneration, cognitive support, mood and stress support. And I was like, well, that sounds great. Maybe I could figure out how to infuse our coffee with these supplements. Because the idea of getting it into coffee kind of began with, I'm on board with these plant medicines, these extra supplements, but I still have to remember to take them. You know what I mean? They're not going to do anything if they just sit in your pantry, So I was like, what if we can kind of habit stack and get them done while we're doing something that we're already looking forward to doing or that we don't need a reminder for? And coffee just was like a natural sort of obvious first thing I think about when I get up. I'm like, all right, it's my motivation to put my feet on the ground is, all right, let's go make some coffee. So if I can get coffee and give me these benefits, now I'm getting the benefits and I don't have to like think about it. So that was kind of the transition to there. Now, diving into some of the kind of specific adaptogens with coffee that help, regulate some of the stress responses so caffeine is a stimulant and it creates cortisol and adrenaline spikes. And that's why you kind of feel wired and awake and alert. But the half-life of caffeine is much longer than the feelings of the caffeine. So what I mean by that,
cut you off for a second.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I was just going to say, if we can clarify what you mean by half-life. I think a lot of us have heard of that. And maybe it's like, from my understanding, it's how long the caffeine or the effect stays in your system.
Yes.
But yeah, if you can.
No, that's it basically right there. It's just, so, your body is still processing the caffeine, for much longer than you are feeling the effects of the caffeine. So you may already have kind of hit that like crash point of like, all right, time for that next cup, but your body is still processing it as though like we got plenty of caffeine. We're still spiking adrenaline. We're still spiking cortisol. And, and that's what might make you have a bad night's sleep if you drink that 3 p.m. cup of coffee or something like that. So as I was learning more and more about the science and kind of seeing how a lot of these things interact, caffeine and coffee is actually one of like the, oldest like plant medicines. It's maybe not the oldest, but like it's an OG plant medicine. People understood if we take this plant, the seeds of this plant, and we roast them, and then we, brew them with hot water, and we drink that, it gives us energy to do stuff, and there's a lot of alkaloids in the coffee plant that are good for nootropic, good for your brain, they're good for your heart, etc. So that's why sometimes you see these things that are like doctors say, drink 3.5 cups of coffee, it's good for your heart, something like that. I wouldn't do that just because there's a lot of caffeine and it's kind of tough, but there are benefits to caffeine. So what I kind of discovered is, like, for example, the reishi mushroom, which modulates your HPA axis, which is like kind of that adrenaline, pituitary thalamic area that kind of creates that. So what the reishi does is it comes in and just helps modulate that, I guess, receptor. Some of my language might be wrong. I'm sorry if anyone, feel free to correct me. But, and that kind of reduces the big spike of adrenaline and big spike of cortisol, and it kind of like tamps them down a little bit, brings you back closer to homeostasis, which is that feeling of like balance, like, okay, cool. I'm feeling good. I don't feel stressed. I don't feel brain fog. I don't feel highs and lows. I'm just like cruising,
Absolutely. No, I think adaptogens are incredible. And one thing that I think a lot of us and most of my listeners are in the health, field. They're supplement takers. They probably heard adaptogens, but I think it's pretty cool. Adaptogens get their name because they adapt to the stressors in your body. So like Jordan, if you wake up today and you're super anxious and I wake up and I'm exhausted, we both can take that same adaptogen and it's going to help bring us back to equilibrium, which I think is incredible. And I need to kind of explore the cultivation and, the history of some of these plant medicines, because a lot of these adaptogens are grown we're focusing on mushrooms, but there's plenty of others that they're grown in extreme climates, altitudes, environments, and they are able to thrive despite their environment, despite being up way in the hills or super hot weather, freezing cold weather, they can thrive. And so we take the characteristics of these ingredients and our body utilizes the mechanisms in the same way. So despite the, extreme environments that we're going through, whether you just come out of the military, experiencing trauma, or you're getting married and you're moving and it's good sorts of stress, we have these highs and lows. And so adaptogens, I just think, are so powerful. And one thing that I love, if you're a Life Seasons user, is any of our formulas that have sort of this stimulant effect. So to caffeine, we have our nitro tea, our metabolism formula, our energy formula. Any of these formulas with some sort of stimulant will always be offset with an adaptogen, because not only is it calming your nervous system, right, it's balancing out the negative effect of the caffeine. Yeah. So I love that you incorporated this. You also have, cordyceps, lion's mane, turkey tail, chaga. Any other kind of standout points on any of those?
Yeah. So, I mean, all those that you just, first of all, that was an excellent explanation. I love what you said. And I didn't know that about them being grown in these extreme climates. So that's a really cool tidbit. But I would say, that list that you kind of ran through, chaga, reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps, those are all, in the like mushroom category. So they're adaptogenic mushrooms, functional mushrooms, superfood mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms. You might hear them being called. But yes, adaptogens are actually a larger umbrella that includes other stuff beyond just mushrooms. So some other, like in our moonlight chai latte, I think I actually have a bag back here somewhere. Yeah, I think this guy. So this right here is sort of like our formulated, it's like a chai latte mix kind of formulated for nighttime. I like to add it to coffee because it makes it like a kind of like a dirty chai. But it has reishi, but it also has chamomile, jujube, and polygala, which is like Chinese red date and another one. But they're other adaptogens that are hypnotic and help your body kind of adapt to those stressors, right?
I love that. I didn't know you created some of those. I saw the coffee, but that's so cool to be able to. So is that like just a powder form, mix it into like hot water?
Yeah,
Right on.
exactly. So I have like that. I have a hot cocoa. That's the same thing. It's like a mushroom hot cocoa. And then I have a matcha, which I've kind of been starting to get into matcha lately too, which is nice because it's actually not a caffeine. It's an L-theanine. So, it's just a slightly different energy molecule, but it has a little bit more of that like sustained, energy over a long time and not quite the like peak and crash. So people are pretty into it, especially if they're not into coffee these days. And you can make it sweeter and stuff like that. So it's actually like been fun exploring like a new breakfast beverage drink that I can get into, you know?
I'm going to put you on the spot because I've never heard, and maybe I've totally looked at this wrong. I always thought matcha had caffeine, but it just has the L-theanine in there, which counteracts.
You might be correct.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No. That's totally fine. Thank you. If that is the truth, which it probably is, then we'll go with that. Because
it's probably a lower level.
It's probably lower than for sure.
Yes, it has less, but it also has the antioxidants, and then it has the L-theanine, and that's why so many individuals can consume matcha, but they can't do. So let's see. Is a powdered green tea that contains 19 to 44 milligrams of caffeine per gram. Or 38 to 176 milligrams per cup. But the thing is even though it has significantly less, you're having the added benefit of L-theanine. And so that's kind of what I was touching upon with some of our formulations is if any sort of stimulant, you have some of the, like sometimes when I'm drinking coffee, we have a formula called anxiety. It's our stress support. And it has ashwagandha, L-theanine, theobromine, magnesium, GABA. And so I'll take the two of them together because then that's don't have that negative effect, kind of what you're doing, putting all into one. And
that's a great combo that you said, ashwagandha and all those. That's nice. Yeah.
Love ashwagandha. But yeah, that's exactly what's happening is that, you know, we're offsetting with those ingredients. Do you have any kind of future product creations or any other adaptogens you're looking to explore, you're starting to research, or is that kind of like under wraps?
No, I mean, nothing really under wraps. So my focus for 2024, 2025 has, been a lot of pursuing a business to business approach, finding other people, like cafes that want to serve our products. In terms of like the powders and stuff like that. Like we have a few now, a couple in Vegas, a couple here in San Diego, and, you know, they make them back with like the steamed milk and, you know, latte art, and it looks like super nice. So like finding more avenues that way. But in addition to that, we've been doing some white labeling and finding, that we do custom formulation. That's been a really fun. So we'll talk to somebody, let's say they own a coffee shop or a coffee brand or some sort of brand, like a health and wellness brand. They want to get into adaptogen coffee, and they're like, and I'm like, okay, well, this is what, you know, these are the products that I offer. And they're like, okay, but we really we want this many milligrams of this mushroom. And we also want to add this, and we want it to be in this form. You know, what I've kind of found is that we can do custom formulation. You know, oh, it's Valentine's Day. We want to do a rose lavender latte adaptogen deal. We can do that. You know, what's hard for me is I'm like an idea guy, and I love the like product development like side of things, but you know, that's like 1/3 of the battle. Then the rest of it is how you got to make it, you got to market it, you got to sell it, you got to store the inventory, you got to do all this other stuff. So it's easy for me to get distracted by new shiny objects and kind of chase them. And so on the D2C side, I'm kind of trying to focus on these, you know, 6 SKUs pretty much and get those going. But on the business to business side, I want to do a ton of different, you know, custom formulations and explore, you know, what customers are looking for and then see about creating that. But,
fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, white label's a big thing that I'm learning about too. And for those of you who are listening, it's pretty much, you know, if you are a company, it's being able to put your brand's label on the product and another company creates it for you. And so you're using all the knowledge and, you know, scientific experts that are creating whatever formulation or product, and then kind of you're representing it as your brand. One thing I'd love to explore too is tell us a little bit more about your podcast, The Mind Body Mushroom, what you discuss on there, kind of what that platform looks like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, podcasting, I really kind of got into it, and we were mentioning this a little bit on the pre-show. that I got into podcasting as being a guest on podcasts, trying to tell my story, promote my brand, just grow my audience, and find like-minded individuals. In doing that, it kind of occurred to me that I really like podcasts and podcasting, and that having my own platform would be a good opportunity to do all of those same things, as well as bring on people to have conversations that I might not otherwise have them. And what we like to talk about is, I've been in this balance of like trying to stay very niche and trying to be like, okay, we talk about, adaptogens, functional mushrooms, holistic health, the science behind that, etc. But also I want it to be an organic, free flowing, interesting conversation, with people. So I think the intersection, what it's kind of becoming is the intersection of, holistic health, wellness, the science around all of that, along with human stories and just people's own, how they interface with health, wellness, managing stress, building a business, growing a family, doing whatever it is that they're doing, and sort of what like tools, techniques, and tactics that they've been able to implement, to live a holistic life. So it's a little bit of all those things, but, just trying to, I really wanted to provide value for people, because I've been steeped in this stew for 6 years now. And so you kind of assume that everyone is like somewhat close to your level of knowledge, or like you can say things and what you realize is, some of the people who you would really benefit from your product or you really want to reach, they don't understand anything you are saying right now. And so you need to figure out, meet them where they're at, and start providing that value so that, they know, like, and trust you. And know, like, and trust me, I want to be there before I try getting you to buy anything, because then that's the easy part. If you know me, you like me, and you trust me, getting to buy something from you is easy.
Absolutely. I love that. Very cool. Is there anything, I know we've kind of tapped into a few different categories today, whether we're talking military, adaptogens, coffee, kind of this shift between the traditional medical model versus holistic model. Is there anything that you wanted to bring up that you feel like listeners should hear before we wrap up for today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll think of something real quick. I think some of the challenges that I still deal with, because it's, you want to go on to podcasts and you want to present yourself as like, I'm an expert. Like I figured something out, that's why, you should ask me, because I figured it out. And, I'm figuring it out is how I would maybe put it. There's some aspects that I have figured out, and I have hard days too. I have days where I'm like, man, the weight of the world is on my shoulders. It feels like nothing I'm doing is working. And I'm very hard on myself. Like I definitely, I will like, you need to get back to work, do this, as opposed to like, hey, it's okay. You just need an off day. You need to chill. And so I'm personally working on, being a little bit easier on myself, and just sort of like accepting that like I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm doing everything that I need to do. I'm putting in the work, just like you said. Like it's easy. See how easily I disregard my input, and you know what I'm saying? Like I'm like, oh, I got lucky, and I did get lucky. I'm very lucky, but I did put in the work. And I think that's for anyone dealing with anything. Like, don't forget to give yourself credit and go easy on yourself. And don't be overwhelmed by the totality of what it is that you're doing. There's a saying in the military, in these programs, like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's you will freak out if you zoom out too far and realize how small you are or how hard all of this is. But if you can just get through today, get to lunch, get that next interview, get that, that's these little incremental goals. That's how when you look back and you see, you were talking about podcasting earlier, you look back and you're like, wow, I've really grown a lot in those first couple episodes. Now you're 100 episodes later, and you see how much you've learned and how much better you have become. And so just taking those moments to give yourself credit and go easy on yourself. And yeah, that's something I'm dealing with.
I love that. I think the elephant kind of phrase, I've always said that too. I think that's a big part.
Yeah.
And there was a season where I hit rock bottom, and I remember, it's funny, I was just on a podcast sharing my story and kind of my journey. And I think she asked me something like, when you were in the depths of it, how did you find hope in the future? And I said, to be honest, when I was in the depth of it, the future wasn't even on my radar. It was minute by minute. How am I going to survive the next hour? And so it's a spectrum for individuals, and it's a journey to get to there of like, okay, let me think about the future. But at that point, it was not the future. It was like the smallest bite that I could take of like, all right, I'm going to take this small little chunk because it can feel so overwhelming, so paralyzing, whatever you are going through. And again, I think everybody's going to experience some really difficult seasons of life. And that's why I think resilience is so important. That's why I think the things that you learn in the military, like my favorite genre of films, it's funny. I don't like rom-coms. I don't like chick flicks. I don't like comedies, which I know is weird. I like war. I call it like, I like only tan movies. Like if it's based in Afghanistan, if it's like there's dirt scenes, there's military, I like prison gang, and I like cartoons. Like it's the weirdest spectrum.
I love it.
But I love just the resiliency and the grit that so many fighters and soldiers have, and to be able to take that mindset over. And there's a place and a role, and I am a super empath, so I feel deeply, but there has to come a time when you're feeling so deeply, you just get stuck and you ruminate in the heaviness of life. And you have to move forward of like, okay, I can feel, but what's my next step? And that's, been my journey. And I think that's part of this resiliency of like, let's build this grit. Let's build this toughness, one, so that we can come to a stable, healthy place so that we can help others, which is exactly what you're doing.
100%.
It's just, it's part of this journey.
It is, absolutely. And when can I say shit? Is that okay? When shoot hits the fan, you kind of fall back on your training. You know what I mean? Like you lose executive function when you are in these high stress, these periods. So, and what I kind of mean by that as a metaphor is that when you're in these chapters of your life that are extremely stressful, what are your processes? Like, if you are like, hey, I'm going to drink a bottle of wine tonight and we're going to party because I'm stressed, that's going to have negative feedback loops and it's going to spiral you in a certain direction. If you're like, hey, I'm really stressed right now, I'm going to go on a walk. I'm going to go, touch the ocean. I'm going to go, spend some time with my kids or go, you know what I mean? Like if your tactics are constructive, and that's what you fall back on in those moments of stress, you're going to get out of there. Whereas if you fall back on self-destructive habits, it's going to move you in the other direction. So that's part of it too. Totally.
I wasn't expecting going this direction, but I'm curious for those listening who maybe are vet, maybe they're, I don't know, coming from my show or coming from you, and they are in the process of transitioning out. They're feeling the heaviness. They're currently on medications. They want to go to the bottle or the pills. They feel overwhelmed. They feel a lack of hope. Clearly, you have this mentality that has shifted you out of this kind of growth mindset. But what sort of advice would you have for these individuals? Again, it's a full spectrum. It's a journey. But what would you say to them?
Totally. Yes, it's a journey. It's individualistic, but what I would say is find your community, because there are veterans in every state. There are, veteran like help groups in every state, nonprofits that are doing things like in San Diego. We donate to an organization called One More Wave. They take, veterans and teach them how to surf. They supply them with surf equipment. But I've gone on many of these myself. I've done a ski trip in Durango that they teach you how to ski and especially adaptive skiing if you have some sort of disability. There's this last weekend there was at the SEAL Future Foundation, they had a shoot. So it was just like over in the Ground Temecula area. They brought a bunch of people out there, set up targets, and had a whole deal. So there are reach out. Don't be alone. Misery loves company. So find other people that you can commiserate with and can hold you up. And I feel closer to the military and veteran community now than I did even when I was in. And it's because it's just like you said, you know, like if you want to get out of your own head, get into somebody else's. And it's, if you're sitting there feeling sorry for yourself and like, woe is me, you know, I was so great. I used to be able to do all this stuff and now I'm broken. Like, okay, yeah, that is going to be your reality, you know, but if you're like, hey, that chapter's ended and now my new chapter is I need to go out there and I need to change people's lives and do something positive. And, then that's going to be your life. June 2023 of last year, I got sepsis. It was like a random thing. I had like an infection that spread to my blood and I thought I was just sick for like about a week. I was throwing up every day. And then I ended up going to the hospital and they're like, thank God you came in. You have sepsis. Like you were like hours away from septic shock. This would have been a really, like you could have died. And I was in the hospital for like 4 days. It was awful. But looking back, the 4 days prior to that, I took my girlfriend on a trip to thank her for something that she had done for me. I was at a military surf competition where we set up and did free coffee thing. You know, if I had died right then, I was thinking about this in the bed. I was like, if I had died right then, that the last 5 days of my life would exactly what I want my legacy to be, you know, that I cared about my community, that I was out there putting my money where my mouth was, you know, I cared about my family. I did things for other people. And, you know, that's the type of person that I want to be. And that's all you can really ask for, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's incredible. And it just your mentality on life and your perspective to help heal yourself so that you can help make an impact on the world, I think is pretty outstanding and, you know, something to very much be proud of because I've had many, many conversations with people, especially people who have gone through the ringer, and it's not as common to have this sort of mindset. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to kind of, your foundation is, I'm lucky, I need to work on appreciating the things that I go through. I think that might be a little bit more humbling, you know, than the opposite of like, well, look what everything I've done. I think your journey is like a much more healthy one. But just incredible, the products that you've created, the lives that you're transforming, the work that you're doing within your community. I very much feel fulfilled from this conversation. I hope others have learned information, and kind of, I know we've talked a little bit about your platforms, but where can people find more about your coffee, the products? Where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my Instagram is at WindanSea Coffee. That's WindanSea Coffee. So there's no D in and. It's just the way the beach is spelled. So WindanSea Coffee on Instagram. WindanSeaCoffee.com is the website. We have a YouTube channel, just WindanSea Coffee, YouTube. Check me out on LinkedIn. I also wanted to make a coupon code for your listeners.
Fantastic.
So 25% off. But do you want to just tell me like what a good discount code is?
Let's do Wellness 25.
Okay, cool. Wellness 25. Yeah, no, I don't think I do. So, I'll create that. So yeah, please, if you enjoyed the show, you want to pick up anything, or even if you want to try sample too, because you're like a little unsure, just reach out to me somehow. And, I'll make sure you're taken care of. But, thank you guys for listening to me, if you made it this far. And, look forward to seeing your orders.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jordan. I appreciate kind of just exploring this conversation, and I guess we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Niki.
All right, take care.